The red tally light on camera one blinked into existence, a silent command that usually signaled the start of something bright, effervescent, and distinctly British. The studio, awash of soft pastels, oversized beige sofas, and the artificial cheer of morning television, was designed to be a sanctuary. It was a place for easy laughter, cooking segments involving too much butter, and celebrity interviews that felt more like a chat between old friends over a garden fence. Alison Hammond, the undisputed queen of daytime warmth, sat ready, her signature infectious energy bubbling just beneath the surface. Beside her, Dermot O'Leary adjusted his cuffs, the consummate professional, his face arranged in a mask of welcoming anticipation. But the air in the studio was wrong. It wasn't the temperature. The air conditioning was humming its usual low industrial drone, but the pressure. It felt heavy, static, as if a thunderstorm had localized entirely within the few feet of space between the hosts and the guest entrance. "Welcome back," Allison said, her voice booming with its usual resonance, though a keen observer might have noticed a slight tightness in her jaw, a millisecond of delay before the smile fully reached her eyes. Now we are joined by a man who needs absolutely no introduction. He is a titan of the box office, a superhero to millions, and quite frankly, one of the biggest stars on the planet. Dermot leaned forward, picking up the cue. That's right, he's here to talk about his new passion project, his environmental activism and life in the fast lane. Please welcome the one and only Jason Momoa. The applause sign flashed. The studio audience, a collection of tourists and retirees who had queued since dawn, erupted into dutiful, enthusiastic clapping. The music swelled, a generic, upbeat pop instrumental meant to induce serotonin. Jason Momoa walked onto the set. Usually a guest of his stature enters with a performance of humility. A wave, a blown kiss, a trot to the sofa. Jason did none of these things. He moved with a slow, deliberate lumber, his massive frame seeming to absorb the light rather than reflect it. He was dressed in layers of distressed linen and heavy leather, a stark contrast to the crisp studio aesthetic. He wore sunglasses, dark and opaque, despite being indoors under a lighting rig powerful enough to simulate high noon. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He simply walked to the sofa and sat down, his presence instantly dominating the physical space. The sofa, sturdy as it was, seemed to groan under the shift in weight. He occupied the center, legs spread wide, arms crossed over his chest, creating a physical barrier before a single word had been spoken. Allison, ever the professional, leaned in for the customary greeting. Usually this was a hug or at least a warm hand clasp. She extended a hand, her smile fixed. Jason looked at the hand through his dark lenses, paused for a beat that lasted 3 seconds too long, and then gave it a single, firm shake before withdrawing immediately. He did not look at Dermot. "Jason," Allison started, recovering with a laugh that sounded slightly too loud in the sudden silence of the studio. "Look at you, you are enormous. I mean, I knew you were big, but seeing you in real life, it's like sitting next to a mountain. How are you doing, babes?" The audience tittered, waiting for the charm, the shaka sign, the famous cool guy laugh. Jason didn't laugh. He slowly reached up and removed his sunglasses, hooking them onto the neck of his t-shirt. His eyes were intense, unsmiling, and focused entirely on Allison with a look of bored scrutiny. "I'm here," Jason said. His voice was a deep rumble, stripped of any theatricality. "Just here." Dermot cleared his throat, sensing the drag in the rhythm. He shuffled his cue cards, a nervous tick he usually managed to suppress. "Well, we are delighted you're here, really. It's a massive coup for us. You've been traveling nonstop, haven't you? The press tour for this new documentary looks grueling. How are you finding the UK? We've turned on the weather for you at least." It was a softball, the easiest question in the playbook. A chance to say, "I love London, the fans are great, fish and chips are amazing." Jason shifted, leaning back and resting his arm along the back of the sofa, encroaching into Allison's personal space without acknowledging her. "The weather is weather, man. It rains, sun shines, it's the cycle. I don't really pay attention to the geography anymore. Hotel rooms look the same in London as they do in Toronto." "Right," Dermot said, the word hanging in the air. "Bit of a blur then?" It's a machine, Jason corrected, his voice flat. You get on the conveyor belt, you say the lines, you smile for the cameras, you sell the product. That's the gig, right? Allison's smile faltered, just for a fraction of a second. She exchanged a glance with Dermot, a micro-expression of confusion that the cameras barely caught. She pivoted, trying to bring the energy back to her comfort zone. Playful irreverence. Well, I hope we're not just a conveyor belt, Jason, she teased, leaning forward. We've got snacks. We've got tea. And I promise not to ask you to do any stunts. Unless you want to bench press Dermot, I think the audience would love that. She gestured to the audience, encouraging a cheer. They obliged, but it was hesitant, the laughter nervous. They could feel the disconnect. Jason didn't blink. He stared at Allison, his expression reading as profound disappointment. Is that what I am to you? He asked. The volume of his voice didn't rise, but the intensity did. A prop? Something to lift heavy things for your amusement? The silence that followed was absolute. The studio hum seemed to deafen the room. Allison's laugh died in her throat. Oh, I was only joking, Jason, she said, her voice dropping an octave, losing its performative brightness. Just a bit of fun. Fun, Jason repeated, tasting the word like it was spoiled milk. I spent 3 years filming this documentary. I spent months living with indigenous tribes, watching their water supply get poisoned, watching their culture get erased. I poured my soul into editing it. I come here to talk about the death of the earth, and you want me to lift the host? Dermot jumped in, his voice rising in pitch and speed, desperate to bridge the widening chasm. No, of course not, Jason. We know how serious this project is, and that's exactly what we want to get into. The film, Deep Roots, it's a departure for you. People know you as the action hero, the guy saving the world in spandex. This is you saving the world for real. Tell us about that transition. Jason turned his head slowly to Dermot. The movement was predatory. There is no transition. That's the narrative you guys sell. Action star gets a brain. I've always been this. The industry just pays me to be a meathead. This film isn't a departure. It's the only honest thing I've done in 10 years. Okay, Dermot nodded, sweating slightly now. So you feel like the blockbuster roles? They aren't the real you? They're a paycheck, Jason said, dismissing his entire billion-dollar filmography with a wave of a hand that was the size of a dinner plate. It's commerce. It's selling toys to kids. I do it because it allows me to fund things that actually matter. But let's not pretend it's art. Standing in front of a green screen pretending to talk to a fish? That's not acting. That's humiliation with a high price tag. Allison sat up straighter. The warmth was evaporating from her posture. She was a fan of those movies. Her son was a fan of those movies. The dismissal felt personal, not just to the industry, but to the audience watching at home. That's a bit harsh, isn't it? Allison asked, her tone sharpening. Those movies bring a lot of joy to people. Kids love them. Families go to the cinema together to see them. Is it really humiliation to entertain millions of people? Jason turned back to her, a smirk playing on his lips that was devoid of humor. Joy? It's distraction, Allison. It's bread and circuses. We're burning the planet down and you're applauding because I wore a shiny suit and hit a CGI bad guy. If you think that's valuable, then you're part of the problem. A ripple of shock went through the audience. Someone in the back coughed. A producer in the gallery whispered a frantic command into Dermot's earpiece, something along the lines of, "Move it on, get him off the soapbox." Dermot shifted his cards, his knuckles white. Right, well, it's certainly a provocative stance. But let's look at the clip from Deep Roots. I think we have a clip lined up. We do, Allison said, her voice clipped. Let's watch. The screens cut away from the sofa to the clip. In the studio, the lights dimmed slightly. Usually during a clip, the host and guest would chat, smooth things over, maybe grab a sip of water. Jason Momoa sat like a stone statue. He stared straight ahead at the monitor, jaw clenched. Allison picked up her water glass, her hands shaking ever so slightly. She took a sip and looked at Dermot. Dermot raised his eyebrows in a universal sign of, "What is happening?" Allison leaned toward Jason, whispering, trying to salvage the vibe before the cameras came back. "Jason, look, We really want to support the film. We're just trying to keep it light for the morning crowd, yeah? Jason didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the monitor where his own face was narrating a scene about deforestation. I don't need you to keep it light, he muttered, loud enough for the boom mic to catch, though the audience couldn't hear it yet. I need you to treat me like a human being, not a circus bear. We are treating you with respect, Alison whispered back, a flash of irritation breaking through. You're treating me like content, Jason shot back. The clip ended. The lights came up. The camera tally turned red. Powerful stuff, Dermot said, his voice forced into a professional neutrality. Really striking imagery there, Jason. It's tragedy, Jason corrected immediately. Don't call it imagery, it's death. Dermot exhaled through his nose. Of course, tragedy. Now, aside from the work, there's been a lot written about you lately. Your lifestyle, your decision to move away from Hollywood, living in a van, roaming the country. Is that true? Are you really living that nomadic life? Jason sighed, a long, weary exhalation that suggested he was explaining quantum physics to a toddler. I live where I am. I don't believe in an accumulation. Houses, cars, stuff, it's all anchors. I want to be free. The press calls it homeless or eccentric because they can't understand a man who doesn't want to hoard wealth. But you have wealth, Alison pointed out, unable to help herself. You're one of the highest paid actors in the world. It's easy to choose to live in a van when you have millions in the bank as a safety net, isn't it? Isn't that a bit, well, rich? The air in the studio seemed to freeze. It was a fair question, the kind of question a journalist would ask. But on this morning, it felt like a declaration of war. Jason turned his entire body toward Alison. The leather of his jacket creaked loudly. He looked at her with an expression that was halfway between pity and rage. You think money buys freedom? He asked softly. Money buys cages. Money buys people like you asking me questions like this. You think because I have a bank account, I'm not allowed to care about the earth? I'm not allowed to reject the materialism that fuels this entire, he gestured vaguely at the studio, the fake flowers, the pastel set. This entire charade? It's not a charade, Alison said, her voice firming up. She was the people's champion, and she wasn't going to be talked down to in her own house. It's a television show, and people work very hard on it. It's a distraction, Jason insisted. You're selling toothpaste and fast fashion in between segments about war and disaster. It's schizophrenic, and you want me to sit here and play the happy celebrity so you can sell more ad space? I'm not doing it. Dermot intervened, his hand raised in a placating gesture. Jason, I think we're getting a bit off track here. We're not attacking you. We're just trying to understand the shift in your perspective. You used to be quite public. You were everywhere. Now you seem to resent the spotlight. I resent the entitlement, Jason snapped, turning his gaze to Dermot. The entitlement of the press, the entitlement of the fans, the entitlement of shows like this that think because I signed a contract to be in a movie, you own a piece of my soul. You don't know me, you know the image, and I'm killing the image. But you're selling the image right now, Alison countered. You're here on a press tour promoting a film. You can't say you hate the game while you're standing in the middle of the pitch holding the ball. Jason's eyes narrowed. I'm here because I have a contractual obligation to a distribution company that threatens to sue me if I don't sit on this beige sofa and talk to you. Do not mistake my presence for participation. I am a hostage of the legal system right now. The audience gasped. It was a low, collective intake of breath. This was the line. Guests were often difficult, or tired, or hungover. But no one called themselves a hostage. Alison's face hardened. The bubbly persona vanished completely, replaced by the steel that had kept her in the industry for 2 decades. She placed her cue cards face down on the table, a gesture of finality. A hostage? Alison repeated, her voice steady and cold. That is a very strong word, Jason. There are people watching this who are struggling to pay their heating bills. People who work 12-hour shifts just to put food on the table. And you're sitting there in a 5,000-pound jacket telling us you're a hostage because you have to have a chat on TV? That is incredibly insulting. Insulting is assuming I care about the price of my jacket, Jason shot back, his voice rising for the first time. You're obsessed with the material. You're obsessed with the puitin. I'm talking about the spirit. I'm talking about artistic integrity. But you wouldn't know anything about that, would you? You're just reading words off a card someone else wrote for you. Dermot looked at the camera, his eyes wide. Okay, let's just take a breath, he said, forcing a smile that looked painful. We're all passionate people here. Let's pivot. Let's talk about the future. You have other projects coming up. You're writing now? I am creating, Jason said, not breaking eye contact with Alison. I am writing stories that matter. Not this fluff. Fluff? Alison asked, her voice trembling with suppressed anger. You think this is fluff? Connecting with people? Making people smile? You think you're above that? I am above that, Jason said. The arrogance in his tone was breathtaking. It wasn't a slip of the tongue, it was a stated fact. I am an artist. This is fast food for the brain, and I'm tired of serving it. Then stop serving it, Alison snapped. If you hate it so much, Jason, why are you still taking the checks? Why are you still signing up for the superhero movies if they're beneath you? You can't sit there and preach about artistic integrity while your bank balance is funded by the very thing you claim to despise. It's hypocrisy, pure and simple. Jason stood up. It wasn't a fast movement, but it was terrifying. He unfolded his massive frame, towering over the seated hosts. The camera operator scrambled to tilt up, framing him. He looked down at Alison, his face a mask of disdain. You have no idea what you're talking about, he growled. You sit in this little bubble, judging people who actually go out and create things. You're a parasite, Alison. You feed off the talent of others because you have none of your own. The studio went dead silent, the kind of silence where you can hear the buzzing of the lights. Alison sat frozen, her mouth slightly open, shock registering on her face. She had been insulted by guests before, but never with such visceral, personal malice. Dermot stood up too, instinctively moving between Jason and Alison, though he was half Jason's size. Jason, that is enough, Dermot said, his voice shaking but firm. You cannot speak to her like that. That is completely out of line. I speak the truth, Jason said, looking over Dermot's head. She wanted a confrontation. She wanted a moment. Now she has it. Are you happy? Is this good for your ratings? It's not about ratings, Dermot said, his face flushing red. It's about basic manners. We invited you into our home, effectively. We have treated you with courtesy, and you have been nothing but rude, arrogant, and dismissive since the moment you walked in. Courtesy? Jason scoffed. You asked me if I bite the hand that feeds me. You called me a hypocrite. That's not courtesy. That's an ambush. You people, you build us up just to tear us down. You love the crash. You want the reaction. He reached up and grabbed the lapel mic clipped to his jacket. He didn't unclasp it. He ripped it. The sound of tearing fabric and the harsh pop thud of the microphone hitting the floor echoed through the studio speakers. I'm done, Jason said. I'm not doing this. I'm not playing your game. Good, Alison said. She was standing now, too. She wasn't backing down. Her voice was quiet, but it carried across the set. Because we don't want you playing it. You can leave, Jason. In fact, please do. We don't need guests who think they're gods. Jason looked at her one last time. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked bored, dismissive, as if she were an insect he couldn't be bothered to crush. Enjoy your fluff, he muttered. He turned on his heel, his heavy boots thudding against the hollow stage floor. He walked past the cameras, ignoring the floor manager, who was frantically waving a clipboard. He walked straight through the gap in the set, past the fake kitchen, and towards the exit doors. The camera followed him, a raw, unedited shot that broke every rule of morning television. It showed the darkness of the backstage area, the wires, the unpolished reality. Cut away, a voice screamed in the control room, but the director was too stunned, or perhaps too savvy, to look away. They held the shot until the heavy fire doors swung shut behind Jason Momoa, leaving a vibrating emptiness in his wake. The shot cut back to the sofa. Dermot and Alison were standing there. The space where Jason had sat was rumpled, the cushions depressed from his weight. Alison was trembling. She smoothed her dress, took a deep, shuddering breath, and looked directly into camera one. Her eyes were wet, but her chin was high. "Well," Alison said, her voice wavering only slightly before finding its strength, "that was certainly not what we expected. I think we all need a minute to recover from that." Dermot placed a hand on her shoulder, a genuine gesture of support. "We're going to take a break," he said, his face grave. "We'll be back in a few minutes with something a little lighter." "Hopefully," Alison added, forcing a smile that was brave and heartbreaking. All at once, the theme music kicked in, that same cheerful, bubbly tune from the beginning, but it sounded grotesque now, a jarring counterpoint to the tension that still strangled the air in the studio. The screen faded to black, but the image of Jason Momoa towering over the host, sneering at the very concept of their existence, was already burned into the retinas of millions.